Ready to go deep on trauma, we're taking a look at how it can stick with us in our minds, bodies, even our relationships.
It's a lot, yeah.
And to guide us, we've got The Body Keeps the Score, this book that dives into not just what trauma is, but how it can live in us in a way.
Yeah.
So how about we just jump right in?
Let's do it.
Awesome. The body keeps the score, huh?
No.
It's not just about, like, our memories, right?
Right. This book argues that trauma is as much a physical thing as it is mental or emotional. Like it's happening in our nervous systems, our hormones, even our cells.
Whoa.
And that, of course, affects our relationships, health, our whole sense of self. The author, a psychiatrist, started seeing this when he worked with Vietnam veterans.
Wow, yeah, working with veterans, I can only imagine the kind of trauma he must have seen. Not your typical textbook stuff, I bet.
Oh, absolutely. He quickly realized that to really help them, he had to go beyond just the symptoms. It was about understanding how trauma was disrupting their lives, their relationships, even their whole sense of what was real. It's like they were living their lives, and then trauma just interrupted everything, like hitting pause or rewind, messing with the whole story.
You know, I've noticed that sometimes when I'm talking to someone who's experienced trauma, the conversation can feel kind of, I don't know, disjointed. Like they're trying to put the pieces of a story together, but they're all jumbled up.
That's a really insightful observation, and it actually reflects what happens in the brain. During flashbacks, the right side of the brain, the part that deals with emotions and sensations, is going into overdrive. But the left side, the logical language part, it kind of goes quiet.
So it's like their feelings are screaming, but their brain can't quite make sense of it all. No wonder it feels so overwhelming. Like, how do you even talk through that?
It's not about logic at that point. It's just pure, visceral experience.
Yeah.
And that's where the body comes in, right? The book's title, The Body Keeps the Score. It's not just a catchy phrase. It's about trauma actually getting stuck in our bodies.
It's not just in our heads then. It's like our muscles remember, our nerves remember, our whole being remembers.
Exactly. It's like trauma creates these little pockets of frozen time. And the past just keeps intruding on the present. It comes out in sensations, in how we react emotionally.
Yeah.
It makes it so hard to move on. Think about it this way. Your brain is like a house, okay?
Okay.
There's the smoke detector, right? Always on alert, scanning for danger. That's your emotional brain, the amygdala. And then you've got the watchtower, the prefrontal cortex, up there trying to make sense of everything, making plans, keeping your impulses in check.
I like the smoke detector in the watchtower. So with trauma, is it like the smoke detector is going off all the time, even when there's no fire and the watchtower is struggling to, like, manage everything?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so you end up feeling on edge all the time, flooded with emotions you don't even understand.
Yep.
Or maybe you completely shut down. You can't even process what's happening.
It must be exhausting to be on high alert like that all the time. No wonder people who have experienced trauma have trouble sleeping,
Yeah.
focusing, even just like relaxing.
It is. It's a real physical response to what they've been through.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. It's not just us humans.
Yeah.
We actually share these responses with other mammals. It's all about fear and stress, those primal instincts.
So how we react, it's like wired into us.
Think about a deer freezing when it senses danger.
Oh, yeah.
That's survival kicking in. And for us, there's this thing called the polyvagal theory. It's all about the vagus nerve, how it connects our brains and bodies, and how we react to stress.
Okay, hold on. I need a little more on that one. Vagus nerve, what's that all about?
Well, it's like, imagine it like a ladder,
Yeah.
okay? 3 rungs. The top rung, that's social engagement, right?
Yeah.
When you feel safe, connected, ready to, be out in the world.
Okay, got it.
But then if there's a threat, you might go down a rung. That's fight or flight.
Yeah, yeah.
Your heart's racing, you're breathing fast, ready to act. But then if it gets really bad, overwhelming, you might drop all the way to the bottom rung, freeze.
So it's like our bodies have different levels of reacting depending on how bad the danger is.
Exactly. But trauma, especially if it's been going on for a long time or happened when you're a kid, it can really mess this whole system up.
Oh, wow.
You can make it hard to get back up to that top rung, the social engagement one.
Right.
You get stuck in fight or flight, or even freeze, even when there's no real danger anymore.
That makes it hard to, like, connect with people, right? If you're always on edge.
It's like trying to build a house on, I don't know, a shaky foundation.
Whoa. Yeah.
It brings us to something really important. Early childhood experiences. Those really impact our adult lives. Remember the ACE study we talked about earlier?
The Adverse Childhood Experiences Study?
Yeah, that's the one.
Oh, yeah. That was mind-blowing. Like, childhood trauma is linked to all sorts of bad stuff later in life.
Exactly. It was groundbreaking. The ACE study showed just how much our early experiences shape us. both physically and mentally, our whole lives. And one of the biggest things it affects is relationships. Makes sense when you think about it, right? As kids,
Yeah.
we learn about relationships from our caregivers.
Right.
So if those relationships were messed up, full of abuse, neglect, whatever, that becomes our normal.
So we end up looking for relationships that are like that, even if they're bad for us.
It's not always a conscious choice, you know?
Yeah.
Our brains are wired to seek out what's familiar, even if it hurts.
Wow.
And that brings us to another thing the book talks about, developmental trauma. This is when the trauma isn't just one event, but like a constant thing throughout childhood.
So this is about kids who grow up in like really chaotic environments, abuse, neglect, that kind of stuff.
It's about kids whose nervous systems are constantly on high alert, whose brains are literally shaped by all that stress. Imagine a kid growing up in a house where there's yelling all the time, or violence. There's a smoke detector, that amygdala, it's going off 24/7. Their little bodies are flooded with stress hormones, and they can't even regulate their emotions. It's incredibly impactful on how they see the world, how they relate to others, even how their genes work. That's developmental trauma. It's powerful, and it's tragic.
It sounds really hard to break free from those early patterns, especially if you don't even realize that's what's causing your behavior.
And that's why it's so important to understand, like, the language of trauma. A lot of times, these folks get misdiagnosed. They get labeled as difficult or manipulative. But when you look closer, you realize that their behavior is just them trying to cope with a world that's felt unsafe since they were little.
That reminds me of the chapter about borderline personality disorder. The book helped me see BPD in a whole new way, not as a character flaw, but as a result of serious trauma in relationships.
That chapter was really insightful. All that intense emotion, the fear of abandonment, the trouble with relationships, it all comes back to trying to navigate a world that feels threatening all the time.
Right.
They're not trying to be difficult, you know. They're trying to protect themselves from getting hurt again.
It's like what looks like bad behavior is really a cry for help.
Exactly. And that's why compassion and understanding are so important.
Yeah.
We need to shift our thinking from what's wrong with you to what happened to you.
So how do we help people who are struggling with trauma, especially that developmental trauma? We talked about how it gets stored in the body, but how do you actually like get rid of it? How do we change that score?
That's the big question. And the book, thankfully, gives us some hope. It moves beyond just talk therapy, which can sometimes get stuck in the why of trauma. It explores ways to help people that really acknowledge the body.
Okay, because honestly, reading about all the ways trauma can impact us, it felt kind of overwhelming. Like a giant tangled mess with no way out.
I get that. Trauma is complex. But it's really important to remember, healing is possible. Our brains are amazing. They can adapt even after serious trauma. We just need to create the right conditions for healing to happen.
So how do we even start? What are some of the things the book talks about?
Well, one of the most important things is mindfulness. Learning to be aware of your thoughts, feelings, and sensations, but without judgment. That can help create space, you know, between a trigger and how you react.
You know, I used to think mindfulness was just like a woo-woo thing,
Mhm.
but then I started trying it and noticed a real difference in how I handled stress. It was like I had more control. I wasn't just automatically freaking out at every little thing.
That's a perfect example. It's about cultivating that inner observer, that part of you that can just notice what's happening without getting swept away by it.
Right.
But of course, for someone who's been through a lot of trauma, just sitting with those feelings and sensations, that can be really, really hard.
Yeah, I can imagine it would bring up a lot of fear.
And that's why it's so important to have a trauma-informed approach. You can't just force someone to face their demons head on. It's about gently helping them build up the capacity to handle those tough feelings, to feel safe in their own body.
So it's more like creating a safe space where their nervous system can kind of chill out, learn that it's okay to relax a little.
Exactly. And that's where things like somatic therapies come in. They work directly with the body to help release the trauma. Things like yoga, EMDR, even dance therapy.
I'll be honest, I was a little skeptical about some of those alternative therapies at first.
Yeah.
But the more I learned about trauma, the more it makes sense.
Yeah.
If the trauma is in the body, you got to work with the body to let it go.
It's about giving the body a voice, letting it tell its story, and helping it become whole again.
Yeah.
You know, it's like talk therapy can get stuck in the why of trauma, but the body doesn't care about why.
Right.
It just wants to feel safe. It wants to move and breathe and connect.
Exactly. And that's where something like breath work can be so powerful, right? You can use your breath to calm down your nervous system, get out of that fight or flight mode, and activate the rest and digest system.
Yeah.
But it's more than just relaxation.
There's so many different techniques. The important thing is finding one that feels right for you and is safe.
I've heard of like holotropic breath work,
Yeah.
where people use certain breathing patterns to, I don't know, almost access a different state of consciousness and process their trauma that way.
Exactly. But even something as simple as diaphragmatic breathing or box breathing can make a huge difference for your nervous system.
I've found that just taking a few deep breaths before a stressful meeting can really help. It's like a mini reset.
It is. It is. It's about creating those little moments of self-regulation throughout the day. So you're not always stuck in that fight or flight mode.
I love how this is all starting to feel really empowering. Like trauma might have had a big impact on my life, but I'm not helpless.
Yeah.
There are things I can do to take back my body, my mind, my sense of self.
That's it. That's the key. You always have a capacity to heal and grow.
So mindfulness and those somatic therapies are key parts of healing. What else does the book talk about?
It also talks about the role of relationships
Hmm.
and community, even spirituality, in trauma recovery.
That makes sense. Trauma can feel so lonely, like it cuts you off from yourself and everyone else.
There's that saying, right? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. We need each other to heal.
And it's not just about receiving support, is it? It's also about giving it. I've heard that helping others can be really healing.
There's something really powerful about being seen and heard by people who understand your experience. It makes you feel validated, like you belong. And by helping others, we often end up helping ourselves, too.
This makes me think about the author's work with veterans. He saw how many of them found comfort and purpose not just through therapy, but through connecting with each other, sharing their stories, supporting one another.
It's about creating those safe spaces where we can be vulnerable and real and know that we're not alone. And this is true for anyone who has experienced trauma, not just veterans.
So if you're listening to this and feeling a bit overwhelmed by all this talk about trauma, remember, healing is possible. It's a journey, not a destination. You don't have to do it alone.
That's a great point to pause on. What stands out to you most so far about this idea of healing from trauma?
I think what really sticks with me is that it's not about fixing ourselves, It's about taking care of our own healing, embracing the whole journey, even the messy parts, and remembering that we don't have to go through it alone. That idea of collective healing feels really important.
I love that. It really captures the essence of what the book's trying to say. It's not just about individual healing, but about creating a world where people feel safe enough to talk about their experiences and get support without feeling ashamed.
So we've talked a lot about understanding trauma, but what about actually healing? What can people do to start changing their own score?
The book has tons of ideas and practices, but one of the most powerful things is movement. Our bodies are meant to move.
Yeah.
And when we're stuck in trauma, all that energy gets trapped, which can lead to tension, pain, even illness.
I'm a big believer in that. Like when I'm stressed, just going for a walk in nature can totally change how I feel. It's like I can actually feel the tension leaving my body.
Exactly. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. Just find ways to move your body that feel good for you. Maybe it's dancing or yoga or swimming or just taking a few minutes to stretch and breathe deeply.
So it's about reconnecting with our bodies, finding ways to release all that pent-up energy from the trauma.
Exactly. And another powerful tool is breath work. We talked about how the breath can calm the nervous system, get you out of that fight or flight mode.
Yeah.
But it's more than that.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about that, like holotropic breath work, where they use these breathing patterns to, like, reach a different state of consciousness and process trauma that way.
There are all sorts of techniques. The important thing is finding one that feels safe for you. But even simple things like diaphragmatic breathing or box breathing, they can really impact your nervous system.
I've noticed that just taking a few deep breaths before a stressful meeting makes a huge difference, like a mini reset.
It is. It is. It's about finding those little moments of self-regulation throughout your day so you're not constantly stuck in that stressed out mode.
This is all starting to feel really empowering. Like, yeah, trauma might have affected my life, but I'm not powerless. I can do things to heal, take back my body, my mind, myself.
That's it. That's the spirit. Remember, you always have the ability to heal and grow.
So movement, breath work, those are important. What else?
Well, the book also talks about creative expression. Things like art therapy, music therapy, drama therapy. Those can be incredibly helpful for processing trauma.
I've heard about those.
Yeah.
They give you a way to express those really tough emotions, the ones that are hard to put into words.
Exactly. It's about tapping into those deeper feelings, that deeper knowing we all have inside. There's a quote from the book that I love. It says, "The body keeps the score, but it also holds the key to healing."
That's beautiful. Like, Our bodies have this innate wisdom to heal, to grow, to become whole again.
Yeah,
And it's not a straight line, right? Healing. I mean, it's not about fixing ourselves, but about like embracing the whole journey, the ups and downs, all of it.
absolutely. And having compassion for ourselves along the way. Healing from trauma is tough.
Yeah.
It's okay to not be okay. It's important to let yourself feel those tough emotions,
Yeah.
without judging yourself.
It's like giving ourselves permission to be human, to be imperfect, to be vulnerable. And when we accept ourselves, that's when real change can happen.
Exactly. It's a journey of self-discovery, growth, and resilience. So if you're listening to this and it's speaking to you, know that you're not alone. There's hope. There's always hope.
The journey may be hard, but it's worth it. Because on the other side of that trauma, there's a deeper understanding of yourself, a bigger capacity for love, and a real appreciation for just how resilient we humans are.
It's about finding the light in the darkness, the strength in our vulnerability, the hope in our shared humanity.
Well, I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of the body keeps the score, but hopefully this gives you a sense of what it's all about and some ideas for starting your own healing journey.
If you're interested in learning more, I really encourage you to check out the whole book. There's so much more to discover.
And remember, this is just the beginning. There are tons of resources out there to support you. Books, podcasts, therapists, support groups. Just keep searching, keep learning, and keep believing in yourself. So what are you going to explore further? How will you start rewriting your score? The journey is yours to create. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into trauma and healing. Until next time, keep searching, keep growing, and keep believing in the power we all have to overcome even the toughest challenges.
It's been great exploring this with you. I hope you find peace, healing, and wholeness on your journey.